BBC Radio Berkshire there with Ronan Keating, and we like playing music, of course, here on BBC Radio Berkshire. It's very, very important, of course, to mums, as we will find out. In fact, I'm going to be speaking to a mum from Newbury who's currently the entire centre of conversation in the parenting world at the moment. You've become a bit of a celebrity, haven't you, Liisa?
My book went to number 1 on parenting books on Amazon, which was very, very nice that parents are really responding to this message.
Yep. Well, the Liisa that I'm speaking with is Liisa Henriksson-Macaulay. And she was surprised to discover that despite music training being the only proven method to boost the brain power and IQ in children, there was very little written about it in maternity books. So she wanted to share this knowledge with other parents. And Liisa said about pulling together over 1,000 scientific studies into one book I have in front of me here. It's called The Music Miracle, The Scientific Secret to Unlocking Your Child's Full Potential. And as she just said, it's gone to number 1 in the parenting bestseller list on Amazon. It's fantastic. So let's take your story from day one. You find you're pregnant,
yes.
And you presumably did a little bit of research into how, the kind of music. Do you play classical music to your baby while it's in the womb, or do you play pop music? A lot of mums talk about that, don't they?
Yeah. There's been this big myth since the early 90s that listening to classical music boosts a baby's IQ, but actually those scientists who made that original study have come forth many times saying that this actually is not the case. It was a misconstrued study in the media, and basically listening to music alone does not increase a children's intelligence. But what actually all the studies have found is that playing music, learning music skills at the fundamental ages of 0 to 7, when 95% of brain growth happens during that period of time, that really increases IQ. It's the only proven activity to do so. And it also increases literacy skills, social skills, mathematical understanding, and so forth. So it's a complete parent's dream, because I wondered when I became a parent 6 years ago, what can I do to help my child, survive in the world and to make the most of life? And I read a lot of parenting books, and in one of them I found this little mention that learning music boosts the connections between the two sides of the brain. And I thought, well, that's really interesting, because I always used to learn music since I was 2. In Finland, all children engage in early music training, which is what I think in my book bring forth with regards to all the scientific evidence. This is the reason why Finnish students have such high ability in all these mathematics, language skills, literacy and scientific thinking, as proven by the OECD's PISA studies over the past 15 years. But so basically I found about that one study, and then I couldn't find more information in other parenting books at all. So then I started to look into scientific journals, and I just couldn't believe how much information there was. Hundreds and hundreds of studies. And every time having dinner with my husband, I would go, look, there was this study I found today, another study I found today. And eventually I thought, well, somebody's got to write a book about this for parents to tell about all these studies, because they're so fantastic. And then eventually I thought, well, if nobody else is doing it, then, well, I guess I'll do it then.
Well, no, and I have to stress, this is, backed academically, rigorously. I'm just looking at the book just now. The bibliography, the citations at the back from the reports that you've lifted your scientific information are roughly 150 pages just of references and where you've taken all your information from. So how long did it take you to do this study and pull all this together?
Well, I kind of started it when my son was born 6 years ago, because that's when I still remember the moment when I read that first study in a parenting book, and he was about 2 months old, and since then I kind of a couple of years I kind of did it as a hobby, being on maternity leave, and then I started to do it more seriously, whilst also developing a music education method for my son, actually, initially. So it's called Moosicology, and now it's actually become this method that's endorsed by education experts in the UK and around the world, which is very nice. So that's the practical side of it. That's my practical take on it. But this book is the theoretical take on it, how important and fundamental music is for all children aged 0 to 7, and how it's something that gets so often forgotten in our culture. I think there's a lot of talk on pushy parenting, how parents take their children to Mandarin Chinese lessons 3 hours a week, and extended mathematics lessons and so forth, and flashcards since they're like 1 month old and so forth, and trying to help their children learn to read before they're 1 year old and all of that. But none of that is actually necessary with regards to these studies. It's actually sometimes very counterproductive, all this hothousing. But what is really interesting about what I call the music miracle, which is the full brain fitness results that music training gets, is that only 1 hour a week is enough as proven by these scientific studies. So not 1 hour a day, not 5 hours a day, 1 hour a week gets the same results as practicing 5 hours a day. They've studied it. Obviously, if a child practices music 5 hours a day, you know, those hothoused children who play violin since they're 3, they obviously, you know, are on the route to becoming classical musicians in 20 years' time. But that's not what most parents want, and that's not realistic to most parents, and it can be counterproductive. I had a friend like that. My best friend at school was actually training to be a classical violinist. She never had time to play, and at age 15, she said to her parents and to her teacher, "I'm quitting. I'm not doing this." She was on the road to becoming professional. Her violin teacher cried.
Well, she wasn't as enthusiastic as you obviously are for your subject here.
Yeah,
you're in full flow here. I'll have to try and butt in somehow as we go to some music. And actually, I want to discuss Liisa's warm-up exercises as well, which I saw just before she came into the studio. More on that in just a moment. This is BBC Radio Berkshire.